This evening, I want to talk about the experience of restlessness. So what is restlessness? This is going to be one of those talks where I pick a word and I talk about it so much that it won't actually sound like a real word anymore. So Wiktionary, which is a website attached to Wikipedia, says, being restless is, not allowing or affording rest. Okay. Now, basic literature, that was a terrible definition. It uses the word in the definition. Okay, let's go to the second definition. Without rest, unable to be still, quiet, uneasy, and continually moving. That's a good definition. It's a good tactile definition. Like you can feel it. You know what it feels like. Have you ever seen like a toddler that's eaten too much sugar, and they just like they start to vibrate and then they climb the walls, and then that is a physical form of restlessness. Or not satisfied to be at rest or at peace, averse to repose, which means I'm against being at peace, eager to change, or discontented. Do you guys know anybody that constantly rearranges their bedroom or their house or their desk? That's a form of restlessness. And then finally, deprived of rest or sleep. Okay, that was a really boring, static textbook definition of what restlessness is. Here's what it really is. It's when you're when you're still, and you either have to be still or you don't want to move. One of those two things. But every fiber of your being tells you you should be doing something else. Think of this. If I made you sit in a little white room with a red dot on the wall and stare at that dot for an hour, do you think you could do it? Most people, when you tell that to them, they would go, oh, that's how you make people go crazy. Except that is the way that the monks and nuns of ages have lived. They go to their chapel and they sit down and they stare at Jesus and they don't move for an hour. And to the outside world, it looks like they are doing nothing. And they are perfectly happy and content with that. And most of us in this room, myself included, that is still intimidating. Why? Why is that intimidating? Part of that is because we have such a drive to keep moving. And it comes from a deeper, more animalistic part of ourselves. Which is why when something explodes, we run. Or when somebody seems to come at us, we fight back. And we don't just take it. It's a deeper part of ourselves. We can be restless in a bunch of different ways. But I think this will make it easier if we understand this before we move on to that. Human beings have three essential ways in which we are moved, either negatively or positively. The first one is physically. The second is emotionally. And the third is spiritually. Here's what I mean. If you are hungry, you feel a pain in your body. And you know that that means we need food. That your body is telling you, I need food. Get me food. And you, like a good obedient steward, get up and go get some food. However, we could also be moved by an exterior force that is not just physical. A lot of you guys tomorrow are going to do a whole bunch of things, not because you were physically required to do it, and not necessarily because you wanted to do it. You're either going to go to work or school tomorrow. God bless you if you're retired. You get to stay home. And somehow you still have somebody telling you what to do. But if you're going to work or to school, you have a powerful psychological force pushing you to do something. If you don't get out of bed and leave for work or school, somebody who has a right to have authority over you is going to be mad. Whether it's your teacher or the administrators of the school or your boss. Again, if you work for yourself, God bless you. You'll do work that maybe you don't necessarily like or don't want to do because there is the psychological pressure put on you by other people. Also, we don't want to look silly in front of other people. And so much of what we do is, I just don't want to look stupid. Immense psychological pressure. Sometimes from nobody, just in my head. But I don't want to look silly. And so maybe I don't say things I want to say, or I don't do things I want to do because I don't want to look silly. The third way in which we're moved is spiritually. We are moved in order to fulfill or do some great duty for God. And that can lead us to do a bunch of great things. And if our place is bad enough, maybe some terrible things. So 3 major components of the human person. There is the spiritual, the emotional, and the physical. And we can be restless in all 3 of those. Restlessness in the physical component is, you ever been stuck inside all day? You know, like when it snowed or rained and the weather was so bad you had to stay inside, but like, again, every muscle in your body starts to twitch, desiring to be outside and moving. We call that cabin fever, but that is a form of being restless. I have more energy than the moment calls for. This is why some people sit in bed at night and just stare at the ceiling and I can't fall asleep. Because their body is still trying to process all the energy it's prepared for that day. Another way this can happen is if you have a school is a good example of this, but if you have a job that is mentally taxing but not physically demanding. So think of people that just sit at desks all day and do the same rote process over and over again. You go home and you are exhausted, but not exhausted at the same time. And that is a recipe for restlessness. Restlessness is essentially what you get when you have more energy than you can spend. Now, the energy is energy, textbook science definition of energy is the ability to do work. So you have more ability to work than you have work to actually do. Now, that sounds like a wonderful place to be, except when you just sit there day after day going, okay, I really wish I was doing something else. Psychological restlessness can come out of a space also where you have no options. And we become restless. We become bored. And we have more energy than we have things to do. Okay, so I'm not going to play with my iPhone like I did the last time I gave this talk. But imagine I have my iPhone in my hand, okay? An iPhone is an infinite internet machine. You all know this. You can spend hours and hours and hours on your iPhone, and we do it because we're restless. But the iPhone only fuels the restlessness. Because most of the time, we're not actually doing anything. We're just, watching videos of cats and stuff. It doesn't actually solve the restlessness because we're not doing anything. Instead, we just feed it over and over and over and over again. And we get more bored. That's why you can go through 1,000 apps at a time, or just looking at photos again and 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 again. And it just goes on and on and on. Part of the problem with restlessness is that we feel that we lack meaning. Like there's no meaning in my life. And that is really challenging because it essentially, if I feel like I have no meaning, what I'm saying is there's really no reason for me to be here. And that's horribly terrifying. And so we try and just fill in that void with whatever we think will distract us for now. And some stuff works for a while until it doesn't. And the dangerous thing about feeding the restlessness with stuff is that the stuff stops working. And so if we're feeding the restlessness with this is the core of addiction. We feed our restlessness or our trauma or our strife into something, generally something that feels very good. So whether it be alcohol or gambling or using the internet or shopping or any of that stuff, it feels good. But what happens is that over time, it feels less good. And because it feels less good, we start looking for more. And we feed the cycle, and there's just more and more and more. We keep looking for more, and none of it gives us any meaning. None of it gives us any hope. Hope is really important. I don't know if you know this, but World War I was started by one guy. One dude. Most of us presume that our life is not going to have all that big an impact on the world after we're gone. Millions of people died because of one guy. Archduke Ferdinand of the Austro-Hungarian Empire was assassinated by an 18-year-old boy. Let that sink in. The guy who started World War I was 18. He was in a group of patriots. That's what the country he was living in would have called him. They were patriots. They were trying to start a revolution in their own country. This foreign dignitary who was technically the emperor of the land they lived in, not the emperor, I'm sorry. He was the crown prince. He was the next in line to become king. Is coming to town. And they're going to start this revolution by executing the crown prince. This sounds kind of out of date, but bear with me. He was a prince. They didn't have any options. There was very little work, not a lot of money, running out of food. Something had to change. And so this group of patriots gets together and they agree on how they're going to cause a revolution. And it gets horribly botched, but at the end of the story, the Archduke actually does get assassinated. Now you read that story from the side of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and these guys are terrorists. These are homegrown, domestic terrorists. And then by sheer dumb luck, they managed to kill, essentially imagine if they killed the vice president of the United States. How shocking that would be if just some random people got together and did that. There's no secret to the success of major terrorist organizations right now. The Taliban, Al-Qaeda, ISIS thrive off of young, out-of-work Arab Muslim men in the Middle East. That's how it works. They go look for disenfranchised, out-of-work young men who are bored. They have a ton of energy, and so they're restless. And they're looking for something because they have no options. There's no hope. So they go looking for something. And they do what every little boy throughout history immemorial has done. They go looking for adventure. Of course, adventure in the modern world has a lot of death and explosions. It's not as glamorous as we might make it think. More importantly, someone comes to them and says, I've got hope for you. I've got meaning for you. Join my army. Come with me. We'll make a difference. Whew. That is horribly attractive to the restless soul. When you're sitting there totally lacking in meaning and you feel hopeless, and someone says to you, come, you'll make a difference with my army. They get taken in. It's been the story of human history from the first sin until now. War is primarily because we get restless and we start looking for more. This is why this is so important, because we make most of our decisions based on our emotions and the way we feel and the way the decision makes us feel. And if most of our decisions are made out of our feelings and come out of our restlessness, that means as human beings, we are not acting and thinking freely. We are just reacting to what happens to us. And if we're not careful, terrible things can happen. Millions of people died in World War I. One dude. Yes, there were some conspirators, but they had broken up, and he just happened to find himself by the car of the Archduke, and the car of the Archduke happened to just, die at the time. He has the opportunity. Terrible war, because a few young men were restless. This is why this is important. I want to read you a different definition of restlessness. This one comes from St. Augustine of Hippo. If you don't know who St. Augustine is, he was a bishop in North Africa about just after the legalization of Christianity, so about in the 300s or 400s. Augustine of Hippo is the most important theologian, period. Everybody after him talks only about the topics that he talked about. Everybody after him only quotes what he wrote. Like they go back to what he wrote. And rarely do you ever find anybody who's worth their stuff in theology who disagrees with St. Augustine. St. Augustine did everything first. He's like Forrest Gump. He just happened to be at the right place at the right time in history. It was the first bishop in the legalized era of Rome, of Christian legalization. And he was the first high-level intellectual to have the freedom to be able to freely, publicly write to his people. And he left thousands and thousands of pages of writing for us to follow. And it's amazing how most of what he said is still what we believe. It's a fascinating character. When he first became the bishop of Hippo in North Africa, he wrote the story of his life. It's called The Confessions of St. Augustine. This is actually the first autobiography ever. He invented this genre. And what he wanted to do was to tell the story of his conversion and of his life up until that point, so that his people could know who he was and he could make an apology for the mistakes he had made as a youth, and let them know where he was coming from. This is from the first chapter of the first book of the Confessions of St. Augustine. You are great, O Lord, and highly to be praised. You are mighty in power, and there is no limit to your wisdom. Yet man, who is only an infinitesimal part of your creation, desires to praise you. He fully realizes his mortality, bears witness to his sinful nature, and is aware that you, O God, resist the proud. And yet this man, this minute part of your creation, desires to praise you. You have made us for yourself, and our hearts are restless until they rest in you. Grant, O Lord, that I may know and understand which is my first obligation, to call upon you or to praise you, and whether first I must know you or to call upon you. But who can call upon you without knowing you? For if someone does not know you, he might call upon something else instead of you. Yet we are to call upon you, so that we may know you. How then are they to call upon you, him in whom they have not believed? How are they to believe him whom they have not heard? Certainly, they who seek the Lord shall praise him, and they who seek shall find him, and they who find him shall praise him. Let me now seek you, O Lord, calling upon you, and let me call upon you, believing in you. For you have been preached to us. My faith calls upon you, O Lord, a faith that you have given me, and that you have breathed into me by the incarnation of your Son, by the mystery of your preacher. You have made us for yourself. And we are restless until we rest in you. St. Augustine, trying to sort of explain his own experience, comes up with this wonderful definition of what spiritual restlessness feels like. We're restless spiritually as opposed to psychologically or physically because we are not in relationship with God. But we were made to be in relationship with God. So when we're living outside of the natural context for which we were made, we become restless. You ever taken a little puppy to some place he's never been before? They freak out because they're afraid. Have you ever been to a place that you've never been before? When I was in my senior year at St. Ben's, I went to Esquipulas, Guatemala. And when we got off of the plane in Guatemala City, not only was I in a foreign airport I'd never been in before, but I was in a place where the primary language was one that I did not speak. And then I began to feel very bad for everyone who comes to the United States as a guest and doesn't speak English. And then I became not scared, but timid. Because before that point, Spanish had been a game for me. Oh, a nice parlor trick, something to know. But not vitally important. When you suddenly get lost in a foreign country where Spanish is the native language, your ability to voice even a few words, incredibly important. Otherwise, you get stuck with no place to sleep and no bathroom or all those bad things. And it's terrifying to be in that position. St. Augustine says that we are restless until we rest in you. Augustine, before his conversion, he lived a very free life. He was trying to become famous. That's essentially what was going on. And he thought he was going to be pretty good at it, as he was pretty smart, but it didn't work. And when he finally made it to the big city, so he was the actor that made it to New York or Los Angeles, and then just never got any work. He went there to be a teacher, and when he arrived, because his family wasn't a noble family, the wealthy of the city wouldn't hire him. And if they did hire him, they refused to pay him. And so he was sort of in this doubly bad situation. He could barely get any work, and the work he got, he didn't get paid for. All this time he was searching for more. And eventually he finds it in God. He has another spot where he says in the Confessions, I don't know why I looked without. The problem was within. You were within me. I don't know why I should have looked anywhere. But you called and you shouted and you broke through my darkness, and now I hear you. That's the beautiful thing about God, is we think that we are supposed to go after God. But that's not how it works. God has made us for himself, and through that calls us to him. We think that we have to make God love us. And we spend a lot of energy trying to do that. The thing is that God already loves us. And if he didn't, there was nothing that we could do to make him love us. It's impossible. And so we become restless because we don't fulfill the thing for which we were made. Now, it doesn't mean that you start following Jesus and then suddenly everything is rainbows and butterflies and it's easy. No. In fact, the restlessness is easier. You know how you know that? Because we do it now. If it was hard, we wouldn't do it. If following God was easy, we would do it. But we don't. And right now, we're more willing to settle for the restlessness than to follow God. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. What it means is we're going to be satisfied in the life that we have. The problem with restlessness is not that we go off and do a whole bunch of things. No. That's actually good sometimes. Sometimes you need that, or you wouldn't get off your butt and go do what you were made to do. If people didn't see things in the world they were dissatisfied with, we wouldn't have the majority of the wonderful inventions that we have now. But when our dissatisfaction rules us, when we start to do this just because I'm bored, we start to chase feeling good. Our normal is to be engaged. And we start to chase that normal, and we have to be engaged and engaged and engaged and engaged. The problem is that we begin to ask created realities to fill the role of God. Not going to happen. It's not going to work. We're asking the created reality to do something that it is not capable of doing. More importantly, if you were looking for a way to be totally engaged and satisfied all the time, we know that we would have to look for something that was really awesome. Right? If you wanted to be engaged all the time, we would have to look for the most amazing, awesome thing. Maybe that's a super collector's edition, high-def version of all the Star Wars movies. And if I just had that, I would be happy. Or if maybe I had a total hunting arsenal of rifles and a mount on every open space on my wall, I would be happy. Or if that one guy or girl would notice me, I would be happy. Or if I had this or if I had the iPhone XS or whatever it's called right now, then I would be happy. And we could go on, just keep going and going and going and going and going. And I think all of us know that when we start to make those kind of statements, it's not true. Because if one more house or car or shiny thing could make us happy, we'd already be happy. The problem is not that the restlessness makes us go search after things. The problem is that the restlessness deprives us of enjoying the things that we already have. So that I have an iPhone 6. I have a functioning car. I have insert whatever. And I enjoy it. It's very different than, that new car will make me happy, because it won't. And the more we go searching for happiness and try and fill up this void that is within us, the more we're going to keep searching and searching and searching and searching. And the more uneasy it's going to make us, and the least satisfied, or the lesser satisfied we become each and every day. This is why restlessness is important. Otherwise, we make more decisions out of trying to satisfy our restlessness than we do out of our actual brains, out of our intellect. So, how do you fight it? Okay, so if our hearts are restless until we rest in you, what does it mean to rest in the Lord, and how do I find that in a deep and meaningful way? Because we can hear that and go, okay, thank you, St. Augustine. Very good. I have no clue what you're talking about. And that's not a space we want to be in. Not because St. Augustine isn't clear. No, he's very clear. But that sometimes we lack the creativity. I lack the creativity to know what I ought to do in order to not be driven by my restlessness, but instead driven by my intellect and by the inspiration of the Holy Spirit. The first thing, borrowing from the treatment of other addictive disorders, is to recognize that we have a problem. Self-awareness is incredibly important. Just to know that I am restless will help you fight the restlessness more. So when you go home tonight and you open the refrigerator and you're like, okay, there's 25,000 things in here to eat. I don't want any of them. Nothing looks good. When you go home tonight and you're channel surfing, y'all, what do you think channel surfing is? It's, I don't want to watch that, I don't want to watch that, I don't want to watch that. And we cycle through the same 15 channels, even though we've looked at all of them and know there's nothing that I want to watch on any of those channels. And you still keep doing it. And if the restlessness is bad enough, you toss the remote and then you go find a computer. Or you pull out your phone. And just to know that you're doing that, very powerful. Because now you can do something about it. If you don't notice it, you can't do anything about it. You don't know what you don't know until you need it and you don't know it. And so when you see yourself doing those things, and these are patterns. Look, y'all, it's not something we don't just wake up today and go, I'm bored, what am I going to do? No, we feel bored, and then we do what we've always done to satisfy the boredom. So if we could take a look back on our lives and see the pattern, if it's channel surfing, or calling people on your phone, or internet surfing, or reading, or talking with people. Not that any of those things is bad in itself, but if we're doing it not for some other purpose other than because I'm bored, it can feed our restlessness. Another good way to fight restlessness is with, guess what? Rest. Real rest. Now this is spiritual restlessness. Physical restlessness, you actually fight it by going work. Go run or play ball or walk or go to the store or to the civic center and walk around the civic center. Whatever it is, the source of the restlessness is because I have too much energy. Well, the way you solve having too much energy, you go burn some of the energy. The psychological restlessness and the spiritual restlessness, a lot of times, just plain rest works. But not go take a nap. Because the problem is we have too much energy. So what the spiritual fathers would suggest is to deeply engage yourself in something that you enjoy on purpose. Now, I know that sounds self-contradictory. Here's what that means. Go read a book. Go do something that you know will make you better. So whether it's reading a book, whether it's working in your garden, whether it's going for a run, go do something constructive. Because you're making yourself better when you do that. And that will give you hope. And you won't get stuck in the cycle of restlessness. Look for the things that are hard, especially if you enjoy them. Y'all, fishing is hard. It's a lot of work. So that is a powerful recreational tool because you expend your time and energy on something that requires work of you. And I'm putting up with that things are hard. And when you do the hard thing over and over and over again, you get better at doing things that are hard. The problem is that we tend to choose to do things that are easy over and over and over and over again. And great, you get better at doing things that are easy. But you don't need help doing that. It's easy. You don't need help doing the easy things. We need help doing the hard things. If we do the hard things, it becomes easier and easier for us to continue to do things that are difficult. Now, the actual spiritual restlessness, the way to fight that is through prayer. Now, a particular kind of prayer that I mean. St. Thomas Aquinas calls prayer the lifting of the mind to God. So, prayer can be, Hail Mary, glory be, our Father. Sitting quietly in your room, reciting those prayers. However, even with those prayers, there's a way to pray them that is just kind of like out of duty and obedience versus actually making that prayer your prayer. Not just repeating the Hail Mary, repeating the Our Father, but actually saying, like, God, my Father, holy be your name, because I will that. Give me this day my daily bread, because I want that. To make the 7 petitions of the Our Father your petitions, my petitions, not just words I repeat. But in addition to that, to be able to take time and actually apply your mind to the mystery and the reality of God. There's a lot there. If you're bored, God is infinite. You cannot run out of things to learn and love and understand about God. That's kind of what the definition of infinite means. So to raise our minds to God, we're never going to run out of things to do. Now we may find a place where this is difficult. We may find a place where we need help, but that is different than not doing it. So if we're restless, especially in that deep spiritual way, I ask myself, am I restless because I have too much energy? I'm physically restless. Am I restless because I don't want to look silly or stupid and I'm psychologically restless? Is there some force from the outside world stopping me from doing things? Or am I spiritually restless? I have all this nervous energy and I don't know why. It's probably the third one. To take that and for a good 15, 20 minutes to lift your mind to God and ask Him to show Himself to you. Ask Him to take away the restlessness. Ask Him to help you follow Him. Those are all good places to start. Because we're restless because we're not resting in the Lord. We're restless because we do not rest in you. Once we begin to rest in the Lord, we start to have more control of ourselves. Now we're not acting out of this insatiable need to be always engaged. We become more satisfied with the things we have. And we learn to love people in God rather than in things, rather than for themselves. Now, it is good to love a person for themselves. It is not good to love things for themselves. But instead to love them in the Lord and how those things bring us closer to God. And to love people insofar as we would help them grow closer.